Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. I am Paula Fontana, Interim President for the National Black MBA Association, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Gold Key Access Live. So, I am incredibly excited about this session tonight because it's nestled right in the midst of Women's History Month, and we have partnered with our Gold Key Access sponsors, State Street, Nationwide, Accenture, and Morgan Stanley to highlight women executives who will share their journey and give candid advice about climbing the corporate ladder. So, we all know the statistics, right? Diversity in the workplace has proven to increase profitability and employee retention. The percentage of executive level positions at Fortune 500 companies who are Black, let alone women, leaves much to be desired. So, the National Black MBA Association is partnering with companies that are looking to change that narrative. The association is providing exclusive access to its membership to assist corporations with matching experienced members to current director level and higher job openings. And we have found such partners in State Street, Nationwide, Accenture, and Morgan Stanley. So let's welcome our panelists for the evening. First, Nicole Crowder, a people oriented management consulting executive with proven delivery, leadership, and relationship skills. Nicole is a managing director with Accenture's financial services practice. As a seasoned banking professional, Nicole has extensive experience in core banking, large scale system implementations, merger integration, talent development, and organizational and process effectiveness. Nicole has more than 19 years of experience helping large financial institutions design and implement change strategies that transform businesses and industries. Next on the panel, Siobhan Gordon. She started her career as a systems analyst before joining Capital One, where she worked for 21 years, first in the technology department and then in HR. As head of diversity and campus talent acquisition for Capital One, she had a tremendous impact across the company through her focus on attracting and developing leaders and mentoring associates. In particular, lending her counsel and insights to advance the growth and development of Black associates. In June of 2022, Siobhan joined Morgan Stanley as the Global Head of Diversity for Technology and Operations, continuing to focus on the diversity work that is both her passion and her purpose. Next, Mia Hairston, an accomplished business and human resources professional with over 30 years of experience in the insurance and financial services industries. She currently serves as the Senior Vice President of Human Resources for the Nationwide Property and Casualty and Marketing Organizations. In this role, she leads a team that provides strategic human resources support and consultation for over 11,500 associates. Mia is a human capital strategist and business partner who has played a vital role as an HR leader, propelling organizations to thrive through change by fostering a culture of transformation. And last but certainly not least, Veronica Lee, SVP and Global Head of Accounting Product at State Street. Veronica is responsible for developing and driving an end-to-end product strategy, including market research, ideation, innovation, strategic planning, establishing pricing guidelines, providing commercialization support, and ongoing management of fully loaded product economics. Veronica joined the asset servicing product team in March of 2021 after spending over 20 years with FIS, formerly SunGard, most recently as head of integrated client experience of North America. Please join me in welcoming our panel. And the crowd goes wild. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks.
Thank
Good to be
you.
here.
Thank you. Awesome. So why don't we just jump right in? And I would love to hear a little bit about you and your career journey that led you to where you are. So let's start with Veronica.
Well, thanks, Paula. So I'm going to age myself. I've actually been in the financial services industry for over 30 years. Started my career in banking and retail banking back in Columbus, Ohio. So my fellow nationwide person, I know Columbus very well. And then progressed through various different roles in financial services, held a number of different roles, working for a servicer, an asset servicer, an asset manager in various different capacities, and then ultimately landed in technology, financial technology, where I would say I expanded my leadership roles in the product management function. And from that, I've continued to progress my career as a leader in financial services and, like I said, technology. And yeah, so that's a little bit about my background. In addition to just my career, I sit on some boards. I sit on a hospital board in Jacksonville. I'm actually in Jacksonville, Florida, married with 2 kids. Just a little bit, like to share a little bit about me personally, because that kind of helps to make or provides a better understanding of who I am and where I come from. But it's just a little bit about my background.
Awesome. Thank you. Nicole, how about you?
Sure, I'll hop in and thanks again for having us. I'm excited about this conversation. So, as you mentioned, about 20 years now at Accenture, all of that time within financial services, specifically banking, everything from large scale transformations to mergers and acquisitions. So, I've kind of run the whole gamut of the last 20 years by way of Spelman College and Georgia Tech. So, still sitting here in Atlanta right now, still proud to be a part of Atlanta. Came by the way of Nashville, Tennessee.
Hmm.
So I said I'm from what used to be a small southern city and now has grown tremendously. So still a lot of family in Nashville. There are a couple hats that I wear at Accenture. So one, of course, is my banking managing director hot hat, which includes some of the things that I just mentioned. But I also sit within strategy and consulting, where banking, the industry resides. Within S&C, I wear a hat of our North America Inclusion and Diversity lead. So excited to be able to look after the folks that sit across North America in S&C, which is about 13 or 14,000 people, and making sure that we're showing up as the inclusive place that we want to be. So that keeps me quite busy as well.
I bet. Thank you so much for lending us your time.
Sure.
Siobhan.
Yeah, so also excited to be here. I probably have one of the strangest career paths that you see for most people, in that I started my career in technology as a systems analyst and a software engineer. My undergraduate degree is in systems engineering. And so I often get the question from people I work with, but then also on LinkedIn, like, how did you get into HR? And I'm like, it was purely accidental. I was a Black woman in tech. And as you can imagine, I was quite lonely.
Hmm.
And so I kept volunteering to go back to colleges and conferences and events to try to recruit more of me. And my side of desk job became my actual job when in 2014, I was approached and asked to join HR to lead diversity recruiting. And ironically, originally I was like, nope, I don't think so, because I'm not an HR person. I'm a tech person. I do systems. But it was pretty cool to think about doing a job that I was super passionate about and already doing off the side of my desk for full time. So I joined HR in 2014, always with the expectation that in 2 years I would go back to tech. And then I since have not gone back. I do work a lot with tech. My role at Morgan Stanley involves leading diversity for all of our infrastructure functions. And one of my largest customers is tech. So I don't shy far away from it. And it is really cool to be able to be responsible for diversity, because it truly is my passion and my purpose, which became even more my passion and my purpose when I too had 2 daughters. So I live with my 2 daughters who are 14 And then my oldest daughter is 18 and in college as a freshman majoring in computer science. So my job becomes more real as I see my daughters grow up in this world that we live in that can often not be so friendly to us. So I'm based in Richmond, Virginia, but I spend a lot of time in New York and super excited to be here.
Awesome. Glad to have you. And then rounding out our panel, Mia, how about you? Tell us about yourself and your journey.
Sorry about that. It would help for me to take it off mute.
You're making me nervous. Yeah.
No, we're good. We are good. I'm very happy to join the panel, and good evening to everyone joining today. I'm very excited to be here. 30-year career in financial services and insurance, of which, like you, Siobhan, I sort of stumbled upon HR and the insurance industry. Very early on, I graduated. My dad was military, so I'm a military brat. I've lived all across the country, never outside of the country. I blame my parents for that because they wanted to stay close to home, but came to insurance about 30 years ago, actually joining Nationwide, and started in the call center, not quite sure what I wanted to do on the financial services side. And from there, I began to go into the business. And so I spent 14 or 15 years of my career selling. I was actually a retirement specialist. I was head of sales, head of operations. I was in a marketing strategy and analytics role, pivoted into Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for Nationwide, which is one of my absolute favorite roles. Like you, Siobhan, very passionate about ensuring that we have a place where everyone can thrive. And then I had been into HR early in my career, and I'm not going to go into the details, but went to head up our financial services HR organization with about 3,400 folks. And then within the last 2 years, I have pivoted over to our property and casualty side of the business with about 11,000 individuals and a team across the country. But very, very passionate about HR and just seeing people reach their potential.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, Mia. So this next question, I won't necessarily ask all of you to answer it, but would love to get some perspective. So Black women. Some would say 2 strikes. What in the world made you want to go down that path of leadership, realizing that there could be, barriers that you would have to face as a Black woman?
I'll start. I'll say that when I joined Accenture, again, straight from campus, and quite honestly had no clue what consulting was, right, or what I was there to do or how I would do, and so on and so forth. And so because I was a mathematics and engineering major, math from Spelman and industrial engineering from Georgia Tech, they kind of plot me right down in financial services and within banking. And so when you ask the question of why did I want to become a Black female leader? Initially, it was just finding my bearings, right? And when I tried to do that, I realized, one, that I didn't see a lot of people at Accenture within banking that looked like me, right? That's from a gender perspective, and of course, being a Black female as well. But then 2, I kind of felt some unexpected pressure all around, that, things that were in the system that were telling me that for whatever reason, that maybe I was in the wrong place, or could I really do this? Was this a spot for me? Could I excel here? Could I do well in this extremely competitive environment that Accenture was? And so I decided that the answer to that was yes, whatever that meant. And quite honestly, again, I didn't know what it was. And so my journey really started off by more being, surely that I can do this, right? Surely that I'm going to compete with the best of them. And that's really how it all began for me, because I started to develop the tendency to move around and push my shoulders out and stand tall and firm in what I knew to be true about my upbringing in Spelman and all the things that I knew, right, that I could stand with the best of them. And so I had something to prove to myself, to my parents, to my community. And quite honestly, that's what I was after initially, not even, becoming a managing director and a partner at Accenture. That wasn't my initial goal. It was just to get in there and prove out that I could carve out a space for myself and other people that look like me.
That is awesome. Carving out the space. That is important. Anyone else? What made you want to go down this path of leadership?
I was going to say, I'm not even sure that I started out saying I want to go down this path of leadership. I think I grew into leadership opportunities. I started with whatever I do, I'm going to do the best job I can possibly do, because I know that I'm not just representing myself. I'm representing, people who look like me, who have aspirations to grow their careers and to expand their responsibilities. So I focused on excellence and doing a great job. And then I think through that, it just presented opportunities along the way. And when those opportunities presented themselves, I seized the moment. And it just to continued, success. And then it presents another opportunity. So I guess my guidance would be do the best that you possibly can at whatever task you're working on. And that can help you, catapult you into potential leadership opportunities.
That's great. Anyone else on that?
I will add to it too. I think now looking back on it, there was a sense of stumbling upon when I started 30 years at Nationwide in the contact center or the customer service center at that particular time. I remember advocating and going to my leaders and saying things like, do you realize beyond pay? Now I was 22, 23 years old, right out of college. Beyond pay, people are going through a lot. People are struggling financially. People are struggling to make ends meet, and they're struggling emotionally. I have no idea. I have a business and psychology degree. I look back on it and I remember them looking like deer in the headlight. And I began to form committees of focus groups. I had no role. I had no leadership power at that particular time. But just like Veronica said, I began to seize the opportunities to gain the voice of our associates and our employees. And as I started collecting those things, I started helping put plans together. And so these are natural sort of leadership opportunities. And people began to say, hey, can you work on this committee? And so I would say to that, it was less about like me as an individual and more about like me wanting to help. And in that, those natural leadership skills began to bud and people began to see those in me and create opportunities.
Creating opportunities. That is what it is about, right? For everyone. So would love to hear your leadership style and how you lead others in this space.
I'll say the leadership style tends to vary, right? And I think a great leader spends time understanding what their team needs and recognizing that no two individuals are going to need the same thing. And I think, it's interesting, a concept that I feel like was floating around in the technology space for a while, but is more prominent now is the concept of servant leadership, right? Like what can you do as a leader to make your team successful? And I think that's really important, particularly now. And we started to see that more during COVID, where what our teams needed were leaders who could be authentic and vulnerable and say like, oh, hey, look, I'm struggling too, right? Like I am ready to get out of the house. I'm tired of being stuck in here with my kids and the dog and all of the other people that were happening during COVID. And I feel like that was a new leadership skill that had to emerge during COVID that some people struggled with, because it was always, you had to put up this front of, I'm a strong leader and I can handle anything. And really what our teams needed to see is that we were people too, and struggling with some of the same things that they were struggling with. So I felt like that became more prominent during COVID and continues to be, in my opinion, a quality of a leader is somebody who knows when their team needs that leader who can be vulnerable. And then also is caring enough, right, to understand that what your team needs may vary, like spending the time with the individuals on your team to understand, Hey, this person likes to celebrate their birthday. This person does not. This person likes to be recognized publicly. This person does not. This person likes an agenda for their check-ins. This person just likes to talk. And being able to adjust your style accordingly. I think that's really important. And personally, that's the leadership style that I have, is I like to be flexible and adjust, but then also know when I need to put my coaching hat on, right? Because maybe somebody is struggling and doesn't quite know what they need. And then they may think they need something, but helping them understand that there are some other needs there as well.
That's right. And I love what you talked about. We're people too. And then you're right. During these past few years, empathy is really what has been needed in order to get us all through these crazy times that we're living in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Veronica, tell me about your leadership style and how you lead others.
Well, it's funny you said servant leader, because I live to be a servant leader. I do believe that, a lot of what you said, Siobhan, resonates with me, like understanding people's individual character and what drives them and motivates them. No two people are the same. And a good leader can draw out the best in people who want to be there, number one. But I also just think that the world has changed and what people value, different generations, some of the younger generations, and what they value in the workforce is very different than, historical other generations, older generations. So I think number one is that whole do as I say, not as I do doesn't really work with them very much. So I do think that you have to kind of show.
Does it work with anybody?
It doesn't work with my kids, Veronica.
And I have those two daughters too, who remind me at home as much as I have it at work. But so I think the servant leadership is something that I personally aspire to, which is, not being afraid to get my hands dirty, to get in there with people, to support them, to try to know them individually, and just to try really to draw the best out of everyone that is part of my team. So
that's great. Mia, Nicole, anything to add?
I was just about to say I could add on, but those were spot on responses. I think the common thread is like relational leadership, right? And the fact that you do to get to know people, even when you think about, or when I think about the leaders that I've had in the past and like who I would work for again, right? It's less about the work and more about the leader, right? And who I'm following. And a long time ago, I had conversations with people around the difference between a manager and a leader, right? And it being impossible to lead if no one's willing to follow you. And that really struck home with me because, it means that you have to be intentional and relational and make sure that you're taking the time to get to know your team and being authentic and transparent and all of the things that we were just mentioning.
Now, do you think as women we have an advantage being empathetic servant leaders, being able to identify with others?
An advantage. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. You can go ahead.
No, I was going to say an advantage. I've never thought of it that way, but maybe I guess it's a personal thing, whether or not, you feel like that, your leadership style or engaging with other people or connecting with other people is something that you do well. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I would want to say that, yes, as women, we all do that well. I think that we're more likely to do that well, right? To your point. But I do think that some of the things that I saw folks, to Siobhan's point, struggle with during COVID, like as we had to kind of transition to be different types of leaders, I saw that less with my female peers, right? It was easier to kind of step into this authentic place of transparency and say, hey, I have these things going on and I'm feeling like this today. And, those types of things became to the forefront, right? When you ask people remotely after months of being remote, like, how are you doing? You needed to look for a real response there rather than just the normal, yes, okay. So to your point, I guess I just answered the question. I was like, I don't know if we have an advantage, but as I talk through it, yes, we do, right? So sorry, Mia.
That's all right. No, I was going to say, right. Go ahead.
No, Mia, you go ahead. You've been trying.
Okay. No, it's all good. I think in addition to, servanthood, authenticity, being empathetic, there's also this notion of being inspirational,
Mm.
because the talent, the war for talent is real.
Mhm.
And people, and I do believe Veronica said this, I mean, their why has changed as to why they're coming to work every day. And I look at it as if, people don't have to be here, we're at my company or your company or our company. People have a choice. And so as we are, leading as women, I think we take those natural qualities that you talked about, but also take the opportunity to inspire, to
Mm.
cast the vision of what could be, to help people connect their passion to their purpose and make sure that work is meaningful every day. I try to I try to spread joy, because
Yes.
there's so much negativity in the world. There's so much negativity in the world, and just on the news and just everything that we have to deal with. I want folks to come to Nationwide, come to our teams and just feel like, man, this is a safe haven and I want to be here.
That resonated so well. Inspirational. Yes. Spread joy and
Mhm.
love.
That's really
Um,
important because in the recruiting space, right, to Mia's point, man, I'm so glad you said that. We always say people don't leave the company, typically they leave their manager, right? And so if you don't have a great manager, and that is somebody that you have to work with day in and day out, eventually you are going to leave. And so, Mia, I'm so glad you said that, because if you don't have a manager that's inspirational, who takes the time to understand what you need, who develops and grows and like is your biggest champion and cheerleader at work, that's when you tend to lose your great people because they don't have that.
Powerful, powerful. So we talked about perhaps maybe an advantage or not. Let's talk the other side. Like, what do you think has been the most significant barrier in your career, and barrier more specifically to female leadership?
I'll start. I think it's going to sound a little bit ironic, but I think Black women can be intimidating in the workplace when they're knowledgeable, command their subject,
Mhm.
are able to achieve results. It's kind of ironic because that intimidation, you would think, oh, there's not as many Black females in leadership and major corporations, so why would they be intimidated? But I think it's because there isn't enough of us sitting around the table in these rooms.
Mm.
They're thrown off sometimes, is what I've seen as you move up the ranks and you show yourself more than worthy to have that seat at the table. So that has been the challenge, not across the board, but you definitely, I think you face that when you're in a position of leadership, being a Black female in corporate America. And I think financials, I think there are certain industries where it's a little bit more accepted, and financial services is probably one of the industries that is where you see a lot of challenge, just because of historical, history is what I'll say.
Now, are we intimidating, or are they intimidated?
That's a good way of saying it. So I would say they are intimidated. We're not intimidating. So I appreciate that correction there. So yes, no, it is. I would say.
Oh, I thought you said, are we intimidated? Sorry, I didn't mean both. But yeah, Veronica. Because I think part of the challenge too is sometimes we get in our own way. So we are intimidated. We have the seat and then we're nervous to use it. So that was the thing I was thinking about too.
Tell me more about
But
that.
I didn't want to jump the line though, because I saw that Mia came off on mute.
I definitely want to circle back.
Actually, I think we all can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Literally, I'm like, we are channeling each other's thoughts. I put self-imposed barriers. I'm going to let you go, Siobhan.
Oh man, this is going to be good.
And I'll add on.
Let's go.
It's interesting, right? And I will share with everybody, like it took me a really long time to realize that a lot of the barriers I face, not all of them, but a lot of them that I faced in my career were self-imposed. It were barriers created because I felt like I had to do everything, right? So I couldn't say no. And so I signed up for everything, and not necessarily everything at work, but everything at home. There were the barriers I created when I said, oh, I can't, sometimes loyalty is a barrier. I can't leave this job because I'm loyal to this person and I don't want to hurt their feelings because I'm going to a new job. There's the barrier of, well, oh, I can't relocate. Well, why can't I relocate? Maybe I can relocate. And so I find oftentimes we place our own barriers on ourselves. And at the end of the day, when you step back and you look at some of those barriers, they truly are self-imposed. And some of those barriers you can absolutely remove. Yes, you can find a new job, you can still be a good friend and loyal, but also do what's best for you. We put a lot of other people's interests before ours, which creates barriers for us. Also letting go. I have a friend who created a group that's called, I'm going to mess it up, but letting go of or tearing down Superwoman, right? Because we have this perception, the Black girl magic, the Superwoman, we can do everything. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And a lot of times, because we spend so much time trying to juggle everything, that we are actually hindering our own progress, right? By not focusing on the things that truly matter. And it's a hard lesson to learn. And it is one that I find that I have to relearn when events happen in my life, right? I had to relearn that when you get a new job, you have to relearn that when you get promoted. I had to relearn that when I got divorced. Like those life changes sometimes force you to have to relearn some of those hard lessons and to think about those barriers that we create.
That is real. And when you talk about like stripping the limits off of yourself, also, very real. Would love to dig a little bit deeper. And with those limits that we sometimes place on ourselves, has anyone ever suffered from imposter syndrome? And if so, how did you navigate your way through that, being able to strip off those, self-imposing limits, if you will?
I'll jump in here. I'll just kind of start with a situation, and just to piggyback off of Siobhan as well. When you think about the self-imposed limits and you telling yourself, what you can and cannot do, there's elements of insecurity that is breeded as well, that creates confidence issues. And you can be the most, right, Nicole, accomplished. You can be the most educated. And at times, you might be the only in the room. You might lack a specific skill, and it's a point in time in your career. I had a scenario where I was in a role. It was a stretch. I had gone into marketing. It was a strategy role. I'd never done that before. And I remember my boss taking, this is the middle of my career, taking me on a little walk and wanting to give me feedback. And they gave me feedback that I was not strategic enough. Now I was in a marketing strategy and analytics role. And I stressed over that to the max. And all I could see was, you're not strategic. You're not strategic. You're never going anywhere. And literally I could see myself like ruminating on these thoughts. And what I began to understand was the comparison by which I was graded was based upon my current environment. But really where I was supposed to be, I was just enough. So yeah, okay, let me just say that again. The comparison in the environment, there were a bunch of marketing analytics individuals that were coming right out of school. That was not what I was going to do. And so to compare me across was not where I was supposed to be. And I found that I stayed in that job and I put my head down and I learned like crazy how to sound strategic, how to think strategically, how to put PowerPoint presentations together. And when I left that role, it was like 10% of any role I've ever had.
Wow.
But it has been the most it was the role that was hands down the role that has propelled my career. And so I say that to say something that we see as a barrier, something that somebody has told us that we couldn't do. We shouldn't spin in it too long. We should just look up and get the feedback so that we can understand what it is that we need to master. And sometimes it's not mastery at the highest levels, because where you currently are, it's just a stepping stone to another area or to another role or to another leadership position. So that was a big learning for me. Like, Mia, try not to put all of your chips, all of your eggs in one basket, because that's only one piece of who you are.
Oh, Mia done preached a whole sermon. Yes. I agree, Jeanette, dropping gems. Anyone else want to tackle that before
I was gonna throw one more barrier out there, and this was just, over the years, I realized that, I had a knowledge gap between what I thought was sponsors, but they were mentors, right? Like me trying to get from one level to the next, and walking behind someone doing tons of work, right? They're constantly putting things on your plate, and you're trying to kind of always show that you're one step ahead, and so on and so forth. But I realized that a sponsor is someone who has and is willing to leverage political capital, right? So, and on your behalf, right? So not just giving you a role or any role or the next role, the right one, right? The one that's gonna show yourself to be ready for the next level. And so for years, I was having mentors that weren't actually in the room or in the conversation, or didn't have the political capital that I thought they did to leverage. And I had to figure out, like, wait a minute, like, do I have the right board of directors that we're always talking about, right? Or do I have the right sponsors that are actually in the room that can move things around for me, that know when the big role is coming up, right? And it can say, let's try Nicole in that spot. And then, right, I have an opportunity to showcase that, hey, I'm ready for this. And so for years, I was kind of, in this mentorship space, and I had all these mentors thinking that, again, that they were going to move the right chess pieces, right? And I really needed a sponsor, and so I very quickly, well, I shouldn't say quickly, it took a while. I learned the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, and that was pivotal for my career.
That is pivotal. So I know I can just ask you guys questions all night because the gems just keep coming, but want to allow the audience some time as well to ask questions. So I will ask another question, but in the meantime, please submit your questions and we will get to as many of them as we possibly can during the rest of our time together. So I want to click down a little bit more into that support. We talked about mentorship, sponsorship. So how can women support other women in their organizations? How can we help each other?
I think the big one is the one that Nicole just called out. So recognizing that the more senior you get, you actually have the opportunity to sponsor other women, right? I always steal a slogan from an organization called High Tech that says push up, pull up. So, when we are not as senior, how are we pushing up our senior leaders and helping them be successful? But when you are that senior leader, how are you pulling up folks behind you? And I say, kicking the hole in the glass ceiling and letting people come along. And so recognizing your role when you get more senior and helping to sponsor women and helping them find sponsors, right? So perhaps you are not the person that's in a position to sponsor them, but helping them to find sponsors. And then how can they learn from your journey, right? We all have had very different experience. We've had different challenges. Mia talked about the challenge that she had. We've all had our challenges. How do we use that as opportunities to help other people learn so that, it's called the cheat code. How do we help them understand the cheat code so that they can learn from all of their experiences as well? So a great way to do that is by being a sponsor. You can also be a mentor if you're not in a position to be a sponsor. Are you actively engaged with your ERGs or your business resource groups, which give you a broader audience to be able to share your story is really important. I feel like we are all in a position where we should do that. And honestly, I enjoy doing that because for me, I learn from the people that I'm mentoring and sponsoring, right? We're in this unique position where I think we have, 4 generations of people in our workforce. And so those relationships are fruitful on both sides. And so I think we all have an opportunity to do that.
That's good. Anybody else?
I think I would add being bold and trying to get to truth and real feedback as quickly as possible. And of course, you do that. I choose to do that relationally, right? So getting to know people where, to the point where I can say, "Hey, I have some feedback for you," and it comes from a place of wanting you to do better, but trying to get there sooner. Especially when you run into someone, especially folks that look like us. I'm always reminding myself that, hey, if it's only you, right? Assume that it's only you that's going to give someone this feedback that they need. And sometimes it's very small tweaks that we need to make to our style or our approach or how we're showing up. And it's very easy sometimes to just kind of think something and see something and kind of just move on past it. And so I'm constantly coaching myself to say, assume you're the one, right? Assume you're the one that needs to give that feedback, and that person needs to hear it as soon as possible to move on from it. And that other people might see it and just say, and just kind of keep it moving. And I don't want to be that leader, again, especially for women and women that look like us. So I try to make sure that I'm getting to that truthful and helpful feedback as quickly as possible.
That's good. That's good, Nicole. So a question that came from the chat was, did any of you invest in a coach in addition to the sponsors and mentors that you mentioned? And what's the number one thing that you learned from that experience?
So maybe I'll start. I will say that fairly early in my career at, it was SunGard before it was FIS, I actually had a manager. So I had a female manager who was a white female manager, and she invested in me having a Black female coach. And so it made the world of difference for me, because I think they were able to give me guidance with empathy from walking in a day in my shoes. So, and I appreciate the fact that I had a leader that had that foresight, right? Because they could have gone out and put me in any coaching program, but they specifically were sensitive enough to realize that I needed a different perspective. So I didn't do it, but I did have an organization that invested in me. And I do think that very early in my career, I learned a lot that I've been able to leverage. And I think it's made a big difference in the progression of my career. So it's worth it. It definitely is worth the investment.
And a Black coach, I like that.
Absolutely. And there are there are companies that are a Black company, focused on Black women coaching programs.
Right. Being able to relate. Anyone else had the opportunity to benefit from a coach?
Yeah. Plus one to what Veronica said. A tip that I have for folks out listening, I asked for a coach. And so I knew at my firm that typically coaches were provided to folks that were a level higher than me. But because I knew that I was a high performer and that the company wanted to retain me and invest in me, I asked for a coach and got one. So the worst that can happen is they will say no. There are also a lot of online coaches that company will offer as a compromise. But before you invest in your own coach, I would encourage you to ask the question if you can get a coach. But I too have had coaches. I've had a white male coach, which was a great perspective to have. And he's actually somebody that I stay in touch with now. And then to Veronica's point, I benefited a ton from a Black female coach who could understand the experience I was having because of my identity as a Black woman, but then also understand what it took.
That's good. There was a comment from Carol, iron sharpens iron, which I think is very duly noted for coaches, but then also for Black coaches, again, being able to relate. So sometimes I know we as women may feel like giving up. Any encouragement, or how would you encourage women to not give up, to continue to pursue their goals, whatever it may be?
I think we all get to a place, whether it's situational, and if you live long enough, you're going to go through restructuring, reorganizations, different leaders. And being in corporate America is not for the faint at heart.
Right.
So, yes. And so being, resilient enough, and then having your personal, I'd say board of directors, but then also just your circle of people who just pour into you is incredibly important. Because when you get to places where you just feel like you've hit a wall, or you're not clicking with your leader, or there's just something that you can't execute against, you need to have a safe place to be able to go and have that real dialogue. And I do encourage individuals, when you hit that wall, sometimes the reaction is, I'm just going to talk. Some people take the road of, I've been in this, I've known this person for years. I'm going to tell them everything that's going on because I am going through hell right now. Mm-hmm. I will caution against that. Be very wise in who you actually talk to about what you are going through. But when you do have those individuals in your life, you wind up talking those things through. A coach can help with that as well. By the way, that's another plug for a coach. And sometimes things are not always as they seem. When I coach and mentor, I often have wonderful individuals come to me and share with me like a problem. And when I take a look at it, it's a different point of view. So get that additional point of view, and then just making sure that you are getting encouragement and support from those that are around you.
That's good. So we have a real live coaching or mentoring opportunity right here with this next question. She has been on 350 interviews and been unemployed for 2 years, has an MBA and a DBA. Any suggestions?
So if I put my recruiting hat on, it's hard to diagnose without more details, right? Unfortunately, interviews can just be that, interviews. What I find to be a lot more effective is leveraging your network. So who do you know in your network who can make it so that you are not just a resume, but actually a person attached to the resume, and can make sure that you are having a meaningful conversation with the right person. A lot of times recruiters are the ones doing the interviews, and you actually want to be talking to the person who has the ability to hire you. Another thing that I would advise too is knowing what you want. Unfortunately, a lot of times companies make us Jacks or Jills of all trades. I am one, right? And when I decided I wanted to go out in search of a new role, you kind of have to figure out what you are, right? Are you a project manager? Are you a process manager? Are you a systems analyst? Like, what are you? So that then you can better actually market yourself to recruiters. And the other thing I would recommend, and for this person, feel free to LinkedIn me, because I would be happy to do a bit more specific diagnosis for you. Having a recruiter in your network is essential, because then you actually can sit down with that recruiter and develop a strategy. And a lot of times they can open doors and create space for you to be able to have meaningful conversations with corporations and give you a leg up over everybody else that's applying for that role. One of the things that we used to have when I was in diversity recruiting was a diversity recruiting mailbox. And so for people who sent their information to that mailbox, we kind of let you jump the line a little bit. And we said, hey, we met this person through National Black MBA. Can you take a look? And what that does is makes you a person and not a resume. And a lot of times you get a lot better response that way. So again, it's hard, and others feel free to chime in, but it's hard to diagnose without more information. But hopefully those tips would be helpful. And again, I would be happy to converse with you on LinkedIn and offer some more pointed suggestions.
That's great. Thank you for that. We are getting some really great questions in. So next one is, as each of you has seen and likely experienced, there have been cultural changes, awarenesses that companies have adopted over these past few years. around DEI. And so the question is, do you feel like companies are adding the role? Has it been effective for you as a Black woman?
Yeah, I'll just start. I would say that those roles, I think, because we have them in State Street, and someone who is responsible for D&I at State Street at a very senior level, as well as there are a number of organizations, like we have something called the Black Leaders Cohort that's MDs and above, and it has been a saving grace for me, honestly. I joined State Street 2 years ago. And, after being someplace almost 20 years, coming into an organization at a fairly senior level, you still need a lot of support around you at all levels of the organization. So I have found those roles and those organizations to be very, very helpful when they're run properly.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a level of commitment from senior leadership around those roles and those associations or groups. And we definitely have that at State Street. I would say with some of our most senior leaders are very committed to diversity and inclusion. So I think it probably can vary. I'm speaking from my experience, and I obviously let others speak as well. I think it probably can vary organization to organization, but I found it to be very helpful.
And I would piggyback because there's a couple of things. It's like, can the role be helpful to Black women? That's almost, and I love the question, and I love being able to answer it as a person who is a former Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion officer, and sat in that role for 4.5 years. I feel like those roles do serve as a place, a safe place, and it's very good strategically to ensure that DE&I efforts impacting even Black women are executed across the company strategically. So individually, strategically. What I will say, though, having sat in that role, those roles are a little bit of Jack and Jill as well. Mm-hmm. So, the role of a chief diversity or a diversity leader is to represent everyone's interest. And so what happens at times, and I have seen this occur, sometimes we can look at it as, oh, it's just a role for Black people, or it's just a role for LGBT people. And it's just a role for, you name the group. It is designed to create a culture of inclusion for all to thrive. And just by virtue of that, where the expectation sometimes can be great, but I think if we can take a step back and realize that those roles are not to drive any one agenda. Does that make sense? They're looking for opportunities to make a difference across all of those groups. And so I think adjusting the expectation of the role and just basically saying, do I work for a company that creates an environment that ensures my leaders all the way down get and understand how to create an inclusive culture so that I can thrive and I can live my best potential. It's all about the culture and the ecosystem that is set up from the CEO down, and less about the role. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I want to sort of go into this next question based on something that Veronica was talking about with the support. Do you find as you move up within the organization, is it more difficult to identify your support systems? Or is it something that you would have established earlier on in your career and that support system just sort of grows with you or goes with you along your journey?
That's a good question. Maybe I'll start. I would say that I think it depends on the roles you take and where you are in an organization. Because I do think, for instance, I'll just use one example. If you've grown up through the ranks at a particular organization, within that organization, you've likely built up various different support groups and sponsors, and relationships. I would say that support diversity and inclusion, or just support you, period, in your career, and they have a vested interest in your career. I think when you change organizations, sometimes you're building up that network again, right? Your support group again. And that's where I was saying, I think if you go into an organization and it has groups, support groups, definitely support groups around diversity and inclusion, building that network and leveraging those people to help support you sort of, navigate and to acclimate to a brand new organization is very key. And to continue to leverage your network more broadly that you've acquired throughout your career, that may not be with in your immediate organization, but is part of your larger sphere in other corporations, or just your own professional network more broadly. That support group is going to be key, no matter what role you're in as you move up, for sure. So it's really not a real simple answer. Sorry, Paula.
Any of them? I want to get into a really great question that came up also. Can you discuss the importance of failing forward or learning from perceived failure?
I can start on this one.
Yes.
Sorry, say that again, Paula.
I said not that anyone on this panel has failed. But
not that anyone hasn't. I'm sure that we all have, right? And I think
we wouldn't be here if we didn't fail, Nicole. I mean, we all had to fail somewhere along the way, right?
That's the one blanket comment that I'm not afraid to make, that we have all on this call failed at some point.
Sure.
And I think that, it's the, for me anyway, this again, it has something to do with your personality type. And I think that Mia talked a little bit about getting feedback and lamenting and so on and so forth. I've had to learn how to get up quickly, right? And what that means for me after falling, and the fact that, hey, this didn't go as planned, or you've made a mistake, or you got this feedback, or this client said XYZ, or you didn't hit your target, like whatever it is, right? It didn't go as planned. And I specifically give myself some time to think about what I've learned from said experience. But then I also have to do the same thing about moving on from it, because I am a lamenter of things, right? So I'll say, oh my goodness, I could have done this. I wish I had said this, and on and on and on. And so, yes, fall, but then, give myself the time to figure out where the lessons are and what I should learn and pick up and take with me. But then you have to cut it off, right? And get up and go. So that's my approach to it and what's worked for me. But others, please chime in.
I think you said it good. I got to get out of my head. Like, we all have moments of, second guessing, or something didn't go exactly as we planned. But getting out of your own head and moving forward as fast as you possibly can, and leaving the past in the past, learning from it and moving forward. So I think you said it best.
Yeah, +1. I put in the chat, feel fast. I think too, allowing yourself to process your grieve curve, your change curve, like have your moment of like, oh man, like I really messed that up. But then what can you learn from it? And then guess what? You got to try it again, and you may fail again. But what's important is that you're learning from each of those experiences. And then go talk about it, because that's how people learn. People learn a lot more from your failures than they do from your successes.
Wow. Go talk about it.
Go talk about it. And then I love a quote that I keep around by Eleanor Roosevelt that says, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. So even if you make the mistake, nobody's going to beat you up more than yourself. But then also, if they continue to beat you up, you move on and you keep thriving and you keep pushing forward. And eventually that won't even be an issue.
I love it. Keep pushing forward. And I think that's a great way to end. I cannot believe we are at the end of our time together. Ladies, this has been amazing. I thank you for your transparency and your time this evening. And thank you again to your companies, State Street, Nationwide, Accenture, and Morgan Stanley for the partnership. And thank you all for listening and for your time. If you believe that this session has been just as incredible as I know it has, we would love to hear from you. We want to get your feedback. So please click on the link to the survey that you will see in the chat. The first 25 people to finish that survey will be entered in a chance to win an Amazon gift card. So do not delay. Again, thank you all for your time. I hope you have an incredible rest of your evening. Good night.